Hello, for the record, Fox News. There are people with the name Chris White who are with the Hartford, a whole bunch of Hartford police I don't know the names of, who know my name because they are involved with Weathersfield Police, other police departments, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, Robert Chevrolet, and people at the bars and the locations next to the state capitol who are involved with an identity theft fraud method against everyone since everyone was born. So to discern this, we need to have a quality of fact-checking nature that allows people to stay focused on predicate acts, reporting them as the subject, and sequence shifts in identity natures of identity thefts and frauds, roles, falsified police reports, more than a dozen falsified police reports after the Trade Center attack, and leading up to it and since. But people involved with New Britain Superior Court, Hartford Courts, Hartford Superior Court, Hartford Probate Court, other Connecticut District Court, involved with the former director, and with his co-defendants, and with a whole bunch of different cases. And people in that case, they attach to fake words. And with the news media, what I'm reporting is at locations, news media attached me and other people to fake words, fake outcomes in cases they lied about through the news media, because other people have been pretending passions and emotions on and off locations, and they've been lying about the passions and emotions of others, so they could bring people before the interbranch locations, also making it up. There are people I don't know at all, and people that I only know because what is actually recorded, where they made exceptions where I would know them, but they couldn't tell the truth about anything. And in other words, what's actually recorded, they can't afford to discern now. Like this Christopher Walters, he brought up too the people at Trinity College and on off Central Connecticut State University, involved with the Spotter family, involved with people on the corner of Knott Street and Walker Hill, involved with identity thefts and frauds with them, with Weathersfield Police, now still further involved with wire crimes and lie progressions between campuses of each age and nature. They also have Ray Reynolds involved. I never had a conversation with Ray Reynolds in my life. They tried to pretend an exception when I was in grammar school. I mean, when he was in a school that closed down after I went to one year in my town. It was a kindergarten, and then they tried to make an exception with middle people, investigators with various campuses, like Middlesex Community College. So there's an Eric Jensen. These are people that are invested with the intelligence community. They already had roles, also with the prisons tied to the cases. They had roles with the investigators, criminally foreign influence, victims, but victim predators. So, in other words, with the overt criminal enterprises and with private ones, as people involved with that since they were in grammar school, since they were in the youngest grades, everyone speaking through others. I don't have anything personal against Ray Reynolds. Those are people involved with a Jim Socha and Jennifer. I think her name is Jennifer Zito. I never had a conversation with her in my life. They tried to make an exception and pretend other. And that's one of the contexts I know Ray Reynolds from. And these are people he's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with Eric Oliveri and other people with on off campuses, locations, roles with an identity theft fraud method. These are also people with conscious recorded uses of where and how little kids can explain the difference. I mean, could reap from the value of what it communicates simultaneously, where that breaching method was preventing Native Americans and colonists' rights sickly distinctly, and where that breaching method was doing so from a increasingly tactically denatured base, forced, and that was left entrenched to great extents when our founders were born. And when after they declared revolution through others as themselves, but with other. In other words, everyone had to hide their roles actually with what led up to the American Revolution. Everyone was in these natures of criminal insidiousness natures, forced by what was forced entertained. Those laws, like not just slavery, witch trials. Now slavery is worse than witch trials. But how it's simultaneous shows what it is about, what it did, and what we have to counter, and what we have to enable again. Better than the extent they went to make communications accessible and privatized and things like that. When the same people who are, in other words, species coach, listen to me, I'm telling you, in other words, fucking the audiences too. They're pretending that just because people offensively pretend passions and emotions against people, they're calling them names, they're making allegations, they're forcing a quality of debate, of qualities of fact sheet in nature that can't afford defenses of their roles with that, and a nature necessary to counter the nature of criminal insidiousness that the very subject of that breaching method that tied to slavery, tied simultaneously to witch trials, tied simultaneously to sick database relationships, tied simultaneously to and as the foundation of modern suits and ties countries. Their only sophistication, their only success, through and as the Constitution abridged, originally still, and that self-value not explained, because that's the foundation of that theater logic, individually grouped in together as the sciences further. And that is where further self-valued roles with what was already exploited at all locations, where the act /S of the original breaching method caused nature itself to demonstrate it. It knew that nature would demonstrate what made unnatural motivations, nature's needs, interests. People who say that things are, if they wouldn't be if they weren't natural, because they're leaving out the quality of fact treatment in nature necessary to discern how exceptions and exception nature can be only there, can be in demonstration of the same thing, but how as nature, for example, criminal insidiousness nature, that's how slavery could be there if it was unnatural. It's unnatural, it's only natural as criminal insidiousness. Nature will demonstrate this. Nature has a volume /S science by and how and why we are individual grouped in together. The only reason we have the slash is because one identity of forever nature can't make more of itself, but through a whole bunch of temporary identities that are half only capable of being the identity because part of our identity is already gone. Note the part of you is already gone. When you were a little kid, you couldn't even speak. So if you were watching this, it's gone. You're no longer a baby. And part of it has yet to come. Because that's how it is volume, the hypervolume. This is what science actually reveals. All the identities of volume in the dictionary, all the identities distinct of a volume of your body are in demonstration of how all volumes can and do share a hypervolume and its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing so as the phenomenon of the perfect guide, as an identity of simultaneous nature. And as exceptions and has exception nature. For example, this is the same reason English is only functional. Part of the ways you know that the stewardships of English are not criminally foreign influence, if we're going by the system. See, now all countries A through Z have agreed to be individually, hundreds of countries individually grouped and together, can't entertain themselves by what was originally and still criminally legalized, specifically to hold all identities of sophistication, of non-sophistication / non-sophistication, meaning that value progression too. Everything could make, invent, abridged, self-valued, logic, passions, and emotions can't be honest about their actual course, which is relative to this, what is actually simultaneous. Anything that is invisible but still discernible, like the subject, like the predicate, like someone's reaction emotionally. That's only the ancients would know that the way to solve things is to understand how what is greater than and more finite than everything while it's being it, and while that already has been. And we could discern, for example, by not assuming that the witch trials were real. The witch trials were real. We know that slavery was, and if you're honest, it is still real. And the extent of it and how sickly distinctly it is still real. Two, that is recorded effectively being and having been employed by the breaching methods Act /S. See, nature is demonstrating that the sciences are abridged. The Constitution is abridged. Everyone needs to pretend they need to pretend they defended it. The same way the overt criminal enterprises, the same way the private criminal enterprises originally, and still uncharged because they're dependent upon them. The same way definitions of reality by the law were abridged, originally still abridged. So we have to use the definition of reality that is greater than and more finite than those that have been leaving out exceptions in exception nature. For example, they have legal takes on what reality is relevant to what is on Bravo Network, and on Fox News, and so now these are journalists, these are investigators, these are in intelligence community, retired and standing, military, originally still criminally foreign influence, not just through the surface nations. Now it's to hide that this effectively motivated, breaching method motivated, uses of names, of little instances in history, to measure and to maintain that no one connects the dots, connects the culture /S, that trying to discern, is trying to discern the hyperculture. And because that's what all volumes of the body /IES are, distinguishing from them. Science reveals that nothing lasts forever but forever. Forever is space / existence. And that / accounts for what is now. What is the value / value progression we now? There's an engineering to it. It is an identity of relationship to positive and to negative simultaneously. So its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that are three distinct identities of hypervolume. Only way it's discernible scientifically. Hyper invisible too. The only way it's discernible too is by using its conjunction slash s to while as the value slash ies of all that is invisible but still discernible with language slash ies for the same exact reason. So, for example, people are with passions and emotions about sides and about the name of, they want to call God, but they want to they want to dictate what the Constitution means by God. And the debate they increasingly self-value, leaving out where and how our founding parents didn't have free speech. All religious things. Everybody was in collusion with uses of positive and negative treatments, of identity treatments, title treatments, locations, voices treatments, sequence treatments that could not defend themselves and themselves from what exploited that. And it knew it made exceptions and exceptions. It tactically denatured everyone's base, the nature of humanity, nature of our fact treatment nature. Sustain that, force Native Americans to fight with Native Americans. Now they're forced to entertain theater, criminal institutions, positive and negative, what comes fluently through that. Not just hundreds of nations. There's a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise that we can syntactically counter and see what can't. And we could already, we can make the agreements, to make it so people can, by accepting what science reveals, all souls actually said. All identity, the ground location since founding, since before cars, the pathology of infrastructure of means to it. It was coupled with uses of theater, positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, like uses of our founding parents didn't have anything to do with slavery. They wanted to. Everyone was a slave, sickly distinctly. So they would blame other things, others and ourselves, even when correctly. And then then they're going to defend that. So simultaneously, everyone's going to defend logic that can't defend itself and afford the short words and revelations necessary to clear the Republic's campus marcia system that revealed by the species, nations working together before the sciences became criminally foreign influence. That is one of the first convictions that a whole bunch of people want made. See, but they'll pretend they'll send in to count themselves or value other people, pretending things about, making conspiracy theories about what people say online. There are problems with people spreading fake medical information, specifically so they could have to send out notices about that, and then they have to rely on medical experts to determine who is doing that or that. Meanwhile, these locations have still been involved with psychiatry, still been involved with identity theft, fraud, using their databases, fake conversations with people, fake conversations, natures of ties to their kids, people tied to their kids, people involved with what is next to the schools, not in the schools connected into cities. That is syntax oriented. This is where and how we need to be defended at fact treatment nature oriented levels. This is where and how we have to be able to use the exceptions in the exception nature, where and how people speak for the economy, pretending with passions and emotions too, not to realize exception nature, not to realize that and how they're hiding it with uses of. It's not about who lies too and who's telling the truth. They're trying to make these arguments as the people lying first, because and mixed physical delusions because that is also tied to how they pretend that people have the wrong attitude towards them, whether lying about what's simultaneous. See, modern nations, A through Z, including America, they're hurt sickly distinctly. That's part of why relevant. The cultures blamed other things, others, or themselves when it comes to the parts where their cultures are trying to be speaking. Like, we're supposed to be using phrases like criminal insidiousness, wrongdoers. That's how you're when you're treating what slavery is correctly. You're wrongdoing itself as criminal insidiousness nature. We're looking at nature. So we're going to use the hyper formulaics, the hyper formulaics identity of possession, of hyperpossession over all parts of space nature / existence. And for example, as sine, cosine, and tangent are functions, ground and the identity that is right to left and that is left to right, that is always bigger than right to left will ever be. And that left right will already be. In other words, there is one identity of possession over all parts of temporary space nature, as an identity of hyper-simultaneous nature that is making more and more forever nature. Only the extent of it is debatable. But the sciences have been debating such, and people have been self-violated roles with it, overt criminal enterprises. For example, a hyper-criminal enterprise, archetypal criminal enterprises, as modern countries A through Z. I'm not a lawyer now, police form, not criminal lawyers too. Roles forcing, quality of fact, chief nature, forcing offensive evidence reception, worse than racketeering, worse than war crimes, and delusions too. And so as behavior predators. And too, with sequence shifting predators. So hyper-archetypal, archetypal, countries A through Z, transnational criminal enterprises, national or interstate criminal enterprises, and exception nature, roles to all locations, where and how there was a method /S that no one saw, and it was behind what was measuring and maintained. Anyone that tried to rise up, they would have to rise up against all these other names and identities, including England. How do you think England kept complete possession of the identity of the ground locations here? Why do you think the Native Americans and it wasn't just England, but all these countries, all forced to be identities bigger than themselves and smaller than themselves, because of the identity of sophistication that came from before them, the breaching method that wanted and needs nature to keep demonstrating it, because it engineered everyone blaming other things other than or themselves. It engineered them needing to hide the same finite, active, progressive lies, sequence shifts, identity theft, fraud roles, use of the ground location roles for this, even timed, because all of that is used remotely, originally and still. Even the prisons tied to the interbranch. See, we have to discern how other countries and how the breaching method itself that came from before modern countries, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they demonstrate to us, as our own governments demonstrate how they were and are maintained criminally foreign influence and simultaneously pretending other. Now they get away with this by pretending to be about mandated law and using their locations to hide all the proofs that they are not. and they have not been capable of it because of how they were child abused per this method. That knew that what we have to say about our founders, and that no one was watching. So we left the identity thefts and frauds against them standing. So George Washington was supposed to tell no lies. We know this because he said because our agenda was to put the Constitution unabridged and to liberate individual rights first in sequence. See, but we have the opposite. And we have all exceptions in exception nature employed by the breaching method. So we have to address, how the economy was even entertained, abridged, how they pretend not to realize by using isms, by using fake sides, by using, pseudo binary, so to speak, for example, with pretending they don't understand the sophistication of, what is really simple. There's an identity of value progression. There's more than the circuit there. There's a memory towards what was positive or negative changed. We left out those database relationships. The people involved, they can't defend themselves as told to, and afford, the same theater of sense and sensibility, for example, humor. Who gives them the right to have humor and pretend and pretend things, pretend passions and emotions, and use other people's names as a branch, while they were just attaching us to more and more fake words and roles with it. These are people at all levels. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, people from Washington, D.C. associated with him, people from New York with the World Trade Center. And they're still attaching me and others to fake words with the victims of also Sandy Hook. The investigators and investigations associated with Sandy Hook, same ones involved intercities with the other Hartford police, involved with a whole bunch of names at Central Connecticut State University playing these games, lying to judges with other judges at the various courts too because of what they're involved with on and off the state judicial branch offices, with the body dumping spot of Billy Grasso, and with the with the kid tied to a guy, well, I don't know his name, tied to John Scully, and people from the Hartford gyms involved with identity thefts and frauds with people from Wethersfield. That's why Alex Mayano begged me to take him to San Juan Center one time. He's involved. That was the only time I ever saw him. I had his name repeated to me. He used to, these are people involved with people on the child abuse registry, including leaders of the kid's principal child abuser. They were more involved then and now. And it has something to do with how the people around me, people that, in other words, not around me, where you're going to say people around you because you saw them walk by you once or twice. They're pretending they know me now. They're pretending that the people that know them, that talk to me, in other words, the courts that have not supposed to be using hearsay, they've been fabricating audio and video. They've been increasingly needing to hide from and hurt and value hurt nature, which is ourselves. They're increasingly timing where people are going to walk. They're lying about the natures of relationships between kids. They're lying about including their own. They're lying about the natures of the relationship to their own kids and other kids. They're lying about their motivations. So you can't call the police because they'll switch. They'll change what you say. They'll create fabricated audio and video outside of interbranch locations. They have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes already recorded as being and having been exploited by themselves. For example, pretending they don't realize that they're not supposed to do those things out of courts and then hide it in court, which is what they have been doing. There's an officer, Hunter, And there are men and women that are in the families of Hartford courts, of judges, and of people that work for them, that are involved with a whole bunch of different natures of organized crime and of child abuses and of uses of elderly homes simultaneously. And like relevant to the simultaneous uses of the probate courts and people involved with the military and the foreign and domestic. They also have they bring everyone using other people's names because we have investigators. We have courts that are already criminally involved with the locations. We do overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones originally still, regardless if they're uncharged. Lawyers originally still. It's clear as day when the people spoke, when Jim Crow laws were manifest. The people defending it and the counters to it are recorded, fighting while fighting with each other, fact, cheating nature, or wise. The only hope. They're using tactically, effectively, criminally self-valuing, sequence shifts, tactically, criminally foreign influence premises treatments, finite, active, progressive, identity treatments, time treatments, simultaneous treatments. So everyone can't afford the simultaneous to be a subject. They want and need people to debate with types of experts that are qualities of abridged, theater takes on, on theory, on the relevance of theory, for example. So actual relativity / hyperrelativity, as is actually presented, as is actually reality / hyperreality simultaneously. This has been forbid free speech. Offensively, they have affected people to fighting with each other, and they have employed people to them formally and informally in collusion with defenses of their opinions on others regarding emotions. Oh, I'm just saying, that's serviced by, you leave it to courts to decide, The courts are involved with when we speak outside. They're getting into our conversations. And then once they do it, you go there, those places switch names. They forge names. They've never been not criminally foreign influenced. So there are a whole bunch of people tied to this Ray Reynolds that are involved with drugs and medicines crimes with kids. I don't know their names yet. I know we can find them out by finding out what his involvements with the people at CCSU, with Jim Sosha and Jennifer Zito, and my name. There's a whole bunch of people involved that I never had classes with, never saw them around middle school. They pretended other. And it's on off Trinity College. And then they had the high life progression. Those were people too, with private school kids from when I went to grammar school that weren't in my class. They were attaching me and people tied to them like a Rick Sam Faglione. They were sequence shifts, lying to the boys and girls, and pretended through other motivations and fitted with other apparent motivations, themselves, their parents. And in other words, Tim O'Brien had originally wanted to have some girls going in the tree fort with us. And I was like, I wanted to do that. But then his mom didn't want that. And like background or something like that. And it was messing because they were using them to pretend they know me offensively. And then when I was in fourth grade, a Rick Sam Faglione, Ray Collo and his sister, Tara Collo, I heard she's married to Officer Phelps, who's one of the officers that Weathersfield Police brought up with their roles with wire crimes. So they're bringing my neighbors into this. They have a Smith family, a bunch of Smith families, a Judge's family, and a Jamie Smith and Dave Smith with the executive branch and Weathersfield Police and Weathersfield town offices, where the Weathersfield Police Department used to be, involved through elections with various natures of federal crime rolls, confessed, demonstrated, recorded, and confirmed. Also involved as uses of corners of streets with the Wethersfield Police Department and as people involved with federal criminals before they got caught and further criminally involved. Also as co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in a 2006 district court case that were also involved with predicate acts on and off campuses, intercities that were timed connected, because there were also uses of names and instances and sense and sensibilities that way. So they involved a whole bunch of people on my street in Wethersfield with timed, coordinated natures of identity thefts and frauds and sequence shifts against me. Intercities on off Trinity College, on off CCSU. Fake conversations with me, pretended for them probably. This is also where they pretend that other people say that everyone is bad. They stack their names up. They stack it through time too, in their own social groups. Fake, and they time it so it makes it look, this is where they pull people before courts, or they arrest people, and they put fake things down. Now these are also people involved with the courts and the police and even child offenders and overt criminal enterprises and people on and off the body dumping spots, because the investigators through time have been used remotely since pounding drums. George Washington said he cannot tell a lie. So we're going to have to deal with criminal insidiousness nature as a nature capable of countering it. We have prosecutors that recorded themselves and their family members having been used to hide how they were used as victim predators remotely already. There was never any identity of sophistication. That's also why they made the stranger that I barely know, Joseph Dennis, recorded involved with, confessed, demonstrated, recorded a whole bunch of people involved with never saw him around, former Mayor Gold, who was his neighbor. And also all along that route from Wethersfield to CCSU in New Britain. And there's a John Dennis involved with others also, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's people with the hospitals and medical locations criminally involved along that route and along other routes and uses of corners, uses of real and made up instances. And when I say real, I mean real where they're painting fake things. They're using truth as lies and lies with truth to use the truth as lies. And they're forcing quality, fact, cheap nature. In other words, these are what motivated it is also how they have their personal doctors criminally involved. The kids that went to Central Connecticut State University that were involved with programs that had them involved with that campus before they were. So we have a criminal justice system. We have military that works with other countries, that works with values like the economies, like the economy/IES. Currently foreign influence and delusions wrought. Increasingly self-valuing how they have pseudo-sophistication to hide behind, which are the needs to counter all kinds of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, generating from, nuclear weapons, things like that. That's their solutions. And what's going to speak for us as our sides? Fake sides. They want to pretend passion and emotions using the names of our countries. It's all right if a leader does. We have to be able to have the individuals of countries and the leaders fight with each other freely. Individual. Or if an individual sees something in that. In other words, there are a whole bunch of ways to see and to discern that and how this correlation is standing. Not just miscorrelation. Tactically induced discorrelation, and it is self-valued because that is used remotely. So the same way the breaching method set up modern nations as pseudo-sophistications for itself. In other words, then they have to individually group it together. They're going to defend the species volume individually grouped in together, tactical ulterior from how it has to be. Or nature will keep demonstrating it. Because it bound us, individually grouped in together, species body, other than has been said. So also they maintain from off campuses involved with increasingly distinct natures of fact, treatment, nature-oriented identity thefts and frauds instances that are also, that was sustained. They would make all wrongdoers They make fact, treatment, nature, predicate acts roles, uses of locations roles. So there are people involved with identity thefts and frauds that spoke fake things and pretended acting to pretend to know me, and they spoke lies at Quinnipiac years ago, tied to a Kevin Harris. So people and Rick Cian Faglione with some prosecutors and judges that have been since I was a kid with this O'Brien family and the Colloa family involved with corners of street, the corners of a principal child abusers campus, and people, and this Kevin Harris also was the daughter of a principal from years ago, and he has ties to like Korea, and their rules with other countries where they don't have, and they were never American identity. These are some fake rat trap identity reception racketeering, evidence reception racketeering, nature's, our side. Not our side, but our side, our only allowed side, our only allowed voice. NBC Connecticut News has wire crimes with these people. These are military police. There's a Parker English who's got physical delusions juxtaposed with roles with timed uses of the identity of the ground locations with the FBI and other agencies, and people with forensics locations and state police, retired and standing, involved with the forensics locations, involved also with fact, treatment, nature-oriented predicate acts, Joshua Julian, with child offenders, even sexual and medical, even judicial predators. Now they've been lying to judges. They've been lying. Male and female judges have been lying to other male and female judges. That's part of it because of the role. These are the people that work for them have been criminally foreign influence. They've been involved with crimes with databases since I was a kid. I went to 9 campuses in my life. And I would have gone to more, God willing. But they do these methods where they switch names, forge names, and they fabricate audio and video for torture methods at locations. And they attach me to fake conversations with officers I never had a conversation with. Like these 2 Mendez police that were reportedly in my grade. I only saw them a couple instances, once at one school, in middle school. I saw them 1 second. And that's with they're involved with people with Mr. Abruzzi, which also people from Central Connecticut State University confirmed, confessed, demonstrated, recorded, rolls with them with a whole bunch of natures of abuses of little boys and girls, and natures of organized crime, and of drugs and medicines crimes, also with doctors with little kids, and rapes with various ages of their family members, in collusion with overt criminal, regardless if it's legitimate, because they have some kind of laws where they have to be undercover or whatever. They're not just legitimately. These are people involved with completely, all other natures of identity thefts and frauds instances, and they can't defend that and afford the connected what little kids can connect, which is why and how the Constitution was abridged originally, and they could discern how it is bridged now. The only reason they can't do it now is because offensively, effectively, arrays of interest, A through Z, therefore arrays of people, A through Z, they have been blaming other things, others, and or they have been blaming souls for why and how everything's abridged, for what caused it, what causes it. And then they can't defend that and afford the voice of a parent speaking for our country, simultaneously speaking for a human species of volume, simultaneously speaking for both parents in each age of that family, simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. So, we could all be on the same page of the hyper-simultaneous. We don't have to agree about the name. If someone has a name, there's means to check their value of God treatment. And so, for example, psychology, psychiatry, they are delusions wrought while simultaneously criminally foreign influence. While they've been involved. They've been involved all private. Yes, they are one of the exceptions, exception nature associated with the interbranch. But they've been involved with the other exception nature too. They've been involved in layers. And with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones kept needing to hide the same sequence, the same fake, the same self-value to raise. Blaming other things, others, or ourselves, the real cause of negative value nature, progressive tax natures. They need all the kids of New York City pretending people were disrespectful. That's why they fought. This is what I heard. They made a whole bunch of fake people increasingly needing to self-value the real cause of negative value nature, progressive tax natures at all locations in New York City, Hartford, Connecticut. Blamed on other things, others, and or on self. Same thing in Wethersfield, sickly, distinctly. We have to discern this tactically natured identity of the grounds, identity of relation to itself. And the value of that only increasing, which enables us to be discerned. So we're going to discern this distinct identity of simultaneous nature in its conjunction to our syntax nature. So the keepers of the sciences will repent, but only one way. Otherwise, they'll keep calling us the making theories about us simultaneously, making things up with us and tell them to sue them. Because they're involved with the courts already recorded offensively, preventing their names from being gotten because they're got. I caught them leading up to the World Trade Center and since. I'm not the only one, but I caught them one way that nobody did. And for example, not NBC, Connecticut News, WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, other news agencies, their family members, their friends. There are people associated with the Perron family. I had nothing to do with the Perron family. They tried to make instances of exceptions. They did that too with Kerr families, with overt criminal enterprises associated with they're involved with Hartford and St. Anthony's Church. They're involved with identity thefts and frauds, with investigators, with courts, people with Hartford courts and the Britain courts, and other towns' courts are involved with them, with the families on my area, like the Smith brothers, Jamie Smith and David Smith. I never had anything to do with them. They were brought up by the people like a Robert Rodrigue, who brought up, in the way he brought up how his wife died, and that was timed connected to the untimely death on Trinity College. A little bit after that, but it was connected to roles as wrongdoing or whatever, but as roles with predicate acts on and off Trinity College. There's a Joshua Stryker. I never had a conversation in my life. He's been pretending other with federal criminals, ones that are co-defendants of Robert Luskins in 2006, that before that case, they were involved with predicate acts, natures of identity theft. What I didn't know was predicate acts, natures of identity thefts and frauds of people on all Fox Connecticut News. Because to the extent I knew about, there's an Alison Mulcahy, I believe her name is. I don't know her sister's name, I don't know her mother's name or her father's name, but these are police farm families involved on all Fox Connecticut News in downtown Hartford, as people involved with a Mike DeMaine and an Adam DeMaine and their family members and people associated with them. See, then they get the sense and sensibility of everyone involved with them with identity thefts and frauds because they grew up as little fakes, pretending people to fake locations, fake ties to themselves, fake natures of ties to themselves, spreading lies about us with other people, as the people involved at locations with the courts calling people before them where they're sick, demented souls, and they can't defend themselves. So they have to make up more things. Vaccines. Now, the prisons tied to them are recorded also how kept needing to hide the same sequence, yet find active progressive lies with them, roles with various natures of organized crime with them before even, and with their patients and criminals, and them in collusion against innocent people before those patients and criminals were even caught. Not by accident. So they have a whole bunch of, they have even the uses of the types of sciences. They have the sciences further, not just the database relationship, but the sciences there. What's that relevant to? Where we are correlation, where everyone's pretending to be about correlation. So it's not about who lies and their motivation. Oh, but that was my motivation years ago, or that was my motivation, when I came up to you. I'm not asking your motivation. When they're showing us these kids in the news, hurting each other and killing each other, then they're showing us these trials. I look at it the way, in other words, what are witch trials about? What were witch trials about? If they were made up or if they weren't, differentially, especially what were they about? They're about slavery. That was one of the things not just existent then, that has not been explained right. You guys keep telling people that George Washington, you have multi-front opinions, counters to them in collusion. You guys can't defend your fact-cheating nature and afford the counters to criminal insidiousness nature because you are it. In other words, what, just because someone says that they're a Trump fan, or whatever, they're making convictions. They're making examples of people that people don't even watch the news. People they're going to have problems with. When that's not the case, that's because all identities of sophistication are fake, and they need to pretend other, and they have styles of doing it and getting away with it that were handed to them. They are used remotely. So there are a whole bunch of people on and off. I'm not asking them their motivations. There are a whole bunch of people that, in other words, I'm just establishing the truth. That recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They are involved with investigations, investigators. Since I was in grammar school, people started confessing and demonstrating how colleges in other cities, or that particular one, how it was and is in Trinity College, how it was and is having been used by people from off the campuses that no one has the sophistication to counter, because no one's following mandated law, because all that too, everyone forced to speak through other people, other things, and attached to fake words, fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people, by the same ones through time. Each year of my life, people I barely know that have connections have been slandering me, have been roles with natures of identity thefts and frauds. So you have investigators, you have families that run different things, that are relevant to what it was and is manifest in Washington, D.C. and World Trade Center tied to Central Connecticut State University, Trinity College, where they are also involved with the interstates and international campuses system. And where fluent through that is something else that is denied by the countries A through C, pseudo-sophistication. They need to pretend that they were presented means to pretend other, such as their reception of the sciences, their defense of the sciences offensively affront to what is correlation nature's actually inherent active progressive means. Like, for example, calculus. They have physical delusions juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence premises treatments. So we have to, and it's differentially. So we have to have things on paper. So we can't do that because they have the foreign and domestic, for example, with inclusion. They're preventing inclusion on grammar school levels and then at middle school with little tricks. With the same people pretending passions and emotions against racism, they're little sick punks with the people that are that have them involved with falsified police reports, or they're not going to be falsified. The wrong outcomes in cases. Otherwise, they're not going to be part of the justice system. The justice system is corrupt originally and still by what is greater than that and more finite than it, while as its value. And this is present where there are readings of statutes. So we're going to look at the cases in the news recently, but like Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, and Connecticut News has been making notes on trials that also brought up locations because they're involved with the uses of locations for the fact-treatment nature. This is where their roles are with everyone with the use of that are fact-treatment nature oriented, where everyone again was blaming other things other than or on themselves, what the breaching method was causing, because it was sustaining it. So we're not going to blame, what's his name? So, listen, you got to follow mandated law for New Britain Superior Court. They're involved with passions, crimes with the FBI and with Wethersfield Police and with their uses of their kids as roles with child abuses, juxtaposed natures, because they also have roles with uses of types of experts that pretend to be, legitimately legitimately capable of dealing with problems, but they're leaving out and increasingly were and are already recorded self-valuing how the real causes of the problems and our use and the real problems relate to one of the biggest problems is their uses of the juxtaposed natures of child abuses and of everyone blaming other things other than themselves. Because this method knew that we would be able to correlate at the youngest ages where and how Native American rights, that means humanities, science, colonist rights, it means humanities, science, sickly, distinctly, they did not have rights. Let alone those hurt most by those sick, crazy slavery laws, torture laws. So the World Trade Center attack, they brought up torture and they made it seem needed. These are also people that are involved. There was a Spada family. There was a whole bunch of people with a Scalora family, IES, multiple Scalora families and Pandolf families are involved with predicate acts and identity thefts and frauds, intercampuses through time and along that route. There, Rick Cianfaglione and John Dennis, I never had a conversation with. Joe Dennis said John Dennis has something to do with the bar, like a sports bar or something like that near Central Connecticut State University. Now there are people that work in Vermont and Maine to learn learn the Arabic language. Now those people and those programs are criminally foreign influenced. They have roles with, like for example, they have war on drugs. That's a measure